In the last video, we ended by noting that specialization in trade allows both parties, in this case Alice and Bob, to consume more goods than they could have if either had been producing only for their own consumption. Okay, now notice that in the example we used, the trade ratio or the price involved was 1-for-1. So for every fish that Alice gave Bob, he had to give her back one blanket in return. Okay, so now let's think about what would happen if you changed the price of fish, or equivalently if you changed the price of blankets. So imagine that instead of them trading at a 1-to-1 ratio, let's say that Alice somehow is a better negotiator than Bob. And so she's able to get him to trade her 2 blankets for every 1 fish that she gives to him. Okay? If we change that ratio to a trade of 1 fish for 2 blankets, then what's going to happen? Now we're going to ignore this middle row here because they're not trading 1-for-1 anymore. Let's think about how many trades. I'm just going to say they trade 4 times at a ratio of 1 fish for 2 blankets. So if they make that trade 4 times, she is going to give 4 of her fish to Bob. So we put 4 in his fish column. And that leaves her with 8. She started with 12, traded away 4 of them. She's left with 8. Bob has to give her back 2 blankets for every 1 fish she trades to him. And so that means 8 blankets will go from Bob's blanket column to Alice's blanket column. And if he's traded 8 blankets away to her, then he is left with 4. 12 minus 8 is 4. Okay, so now notice that they're no longer receiving the same consumption bundle that they were before. Bob, well, let's actually start with Alice. She's obviously better off trading at that ratio than she would be if she was producing only for her own consumption. So she would get 8 blankets and 8 fish, and that would put her right there on the graph. Bob, however, notice that he's obviously not doing as well as he was when they were trading 1-for-1, but is he still better off than he would be if he was stuck on his own production possibility frontier? Well, he gets 4 blankets and he gets 4 fish, and notice that that puts him at a point right about there. And so yes, we can see that even trading at this higher price, Bob is still better off specializing in trading with Alice than he would be if he was on the island all by himself, just producing for his own consumption. Okay. Now let's think about logically how far we can push that. How high can we get the price to be before Bob is no better off trading, specializing in trading, than he would be just producing for his own consumption? Visually speaking, that's going to happen when the price gets so great that we push the red dot, the red consumption bundle that Bob is receiving, back down to this production possibility frontier, or possibly even beyond it. Okay. Now, to think about that, to figure out what the limit is on the price that he would be willing to pay, we have to think about a concept that economists call opportunity cost. All right. So let's think about the effect that opportunity costs would have on prices. First of all, let's define opportunity cost. Your opportunity cost is your most valuable foregone alternative. Okay? So anytime you decide to do one thing, you are simultaneously deciding not to do anything else. You are saying no to every activity except for one. Okay? Now, you may have heard an uncle or your dad at some point in your life may have told you there's no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, and what your parent or your uncle was probably telling you was, if you do something if somebody does something for you and they don't charge you for it, they're probably going to come back and ask for something in return later. Okay, that person may have paid for your lunch, so in that sense you might think of it as free, but now you kind of owe them, right? You're going to have to do them a favor at some point in the future. Economists, we have that phrase, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but when an economist says it, we actually mean something different. Okay? An economist would say, look, even if that person paid for your lunch and they never ask for a favor again, and you never do anything for them in the future, that lunch was still not free. And the reason for that is the lunch had an opportunity cost. If you weren't going out to lunch with that person, you would have been doing something else. And that something else would have had some value to you. So even if you don't have to put the money down to buy your own lunch, you had to give up doing something else. And the value of that opportunity cost is effectively it's the price you paid, the cost that you bore for getting that lunch. Okay. Now, notice that I said if you do one thing, if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. But your opportunity cost is not the everything else that you could have done. It's just the one other thing that you would have done. It is your most valuable foregone alternative. So think about it in these terms. Suppose you have 3 different business opportunities. Opportunity A, B, and C. And opportunity A would net you a profit of $1 million. Opportunity B would net you a profit of $700,000. And opportunity C would net you a profit of $500,000. If you are faced with these opportunities, pretty obviously, you're going to pick the one that gives you the biggest payout. Opportunity A, that's the one that you would choose. Your opportunity cost is not both of these 2 other opportunities, because you could have only done one of them if you weren't doing opportunity A. So it's going to be the more valuable of your foregone alternatives. It's going to be opportunity B. This would be your opportunity cost. Okay. Now this has obvious implications for, financial decisions or business decisions, but notice that opportunity costs are everywhere. You could think of opportunity costs in relationship terms, right? Suppose that you are in a committed relationship with somebody, you have a boyfriend or you have a girlfriend. Well, you still have an opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost would be the best, maybe the best looking or, the best match for you that you could be dating if you broke up with your current significant other. Okay, that's an opportunity cost in relational terms. But we're going to focus on it in financial terms or in terms of goods and services. All right, so let's take that concept of opportunity cost we'll apply it to Alice and Bob. In our simple world, there aren't 3 opportunities, A, B, and C. There are only 2 productive opportunities. There's fish and there's blankets. And we can think about what is the opportunity cost of every fish that each of these 2 people produces or catches. Well, the opportunity cost of the fish that you catch is going to be the blankets that you could have been weaving instead. And the opportunity cost of the blankets that you weave are going to be the fish that you could have caught in the same amount of time. All right, so what are these opportunity costs going to be for Alice and Bob? Well, remember that Alice can catch 1 fish in 1 hour, but it takes her 3 hours to weave a blanket. So in the time that it took her to catch 1 fish, she could have gotten 1/3 of a blanket woven. So her opportunity cost of 1 fish is 1/3 of a blanket. And the reverse is also true. If it takes her 3 hours to weave that blanket, in those 3 hours, she could have caught 3 fish. So her opportunity cost of 1 blanket is 3 fish. Notice the relationship between these 2 numbers here, 1/3 and 3. If you're working in a simple world where there's only 2 opportunities, if you find the opportunity cost of 1 thing, then you just take the reciprocal and you will have the opportunity cost of the other thing. Okay, so 1/3 of a blanket is given up for every fish. 3 fish is given up for every blanket. Now Bob, he has exactly the reverse productive possibilities. It takes him 3 hours to catch a fish, 1 hour to weave a blanket. So in those 3 hours that he was catching this 1 fish, he could have woven 3 blankets. And that is his opportunity cost. And now using the lesson that we learned up here, if I take those 3 blankets and find the reciprocal, we know that his opportunity cost is going to be 1/3 of a fish. Okay, so what does this tell us about the highest price that Bob would be willing to pay or could pay without, say, making himself worse off by specializing in trading than by producing for his own consumption? Well, think about what it costs Bob to produce a fish on his own. It costs him 3 blankets to produce 1 fish on his own because that's his opportunity cost of production. So as long as Alice is charging him a price that is less than 3 blankets for 1 fish, he's going to be better off specializing and trading with her than he would be if he just made everything for himself. The same thing is true for Alice, by the way. For every 1 blanket she produces, that would cost her 3 fish. And so as long as she has to give up fewer than 3 fish to get 1 blanket from Bob, she will also be better off specializing in trading than she would be producing for herself. Okay. Now that you can also sort of derive from the slopes of these curves. Notice that this is telling us the slope of her production possibility frontier is telling us that it takes for every 3 fish she gives up, she's going to get 1 blanket. So as long as she's trading at for fewer than 3 fish for every blanket, her consumption bundle is going to be somewhere off to the right of this blue curve. Same thing is true for Bob's production possibility frontier. The slope of this is telling us that for every extra fish that he wants to get, he would be giving up 3 blankets. So as long as he can get a price that's less than 3 blankets per fish, his consumption bundle, the red dot, is going to be somewhere above and to the right of his production possibility frontier. Okay, so you can use those opportunity costs to sort of put bounds on what are the prices that people would be willing to pay. In the next video, we're going to relax the assumption that Alice and Bob are each better at one thing than the other is, and see if both parties are still better off when one of them is better at producing both things than the other is.